Night Owls of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing that ever happened to you past midnight? By with Noob74.
A Matter of Time says. It was just after midnight one Friday night/Saturday morning, and my wife and I were talking downstairs just about ready to turn in when the landline phone started ringing. My first thought was, oh God, something bad has happened for somebody to be calling at this time. I picked up the phone and saw on the display that it was showing my wife's cell/mobile number. I turned to her and asked where her phone was, thinking that she'd left it somewhere and somebody had found it and was calling us using it to say they'd found it. Hadn't quite thought in that second that they would need to unlock it. She said it was upstairs. I gave her a sort of withering Sheldon look and answered the phone. I said hello, but nobody answered, so handed the phone to my wife and went upstairs looking for the phone. It was resting face down on the side of the bed. When I picked it up, it was all lit up and showing that it was calling our landline. So how did a smartphone unlock itself? With the correct security code, navigate to contacts, find our home number and call it on its own?
ACoolWizard says. More funny than creepy, but definitely odd. I was sitting on my apartment balcony about 2:30 a.m. last week, and one of my cats was chilling with me at the other end on the balcony railing. We're on the second floor, across from a very dark park, and the cats love sitting to watch the world go by. Anyway, I'm sitting browsing Reddit and having a dart when I hear some little voice go mew. At first, I thought it was the cat, but then I hear it again, this little mew. Mew mew. PSST. And notice my cat is staring intently down at the road. I lean forward to look down through my balcony slats, and some woman has stopped her car in the middle of the street, leaned out the window, and is meowing up at my cat on the railing. I didn't want to stand up and startle her, so I just waited, and she sat there for 5 minutes mewing and trying to get his attention before speeding off. Very strange. Assume drugs were involved.
considerabledolphin says. I usually have a rule that I don't leave my room for whatever reason after 3 a.m. because one night when I was getting water from the fridge I had felt eyes directly on me, giving me goosebumps and making my heart beat faster. I turned to look towards my front door that has glass panes on either side of it, only to see 2 white orbs staring back at me. I have felt so much fear in my life.
ElvisFan994 says. Well, the other night I was reading creepypastas on my phone and the front door handle started jiggling and the porch light came and I heard someone say shit and ran.
Ebola-Extra says. I studied in my research lab as an undergrad and sometimes very late at night, especially during finals week. The research building itself was older and not renovated, more dimly lit, wooden surfaces and cabinets, dust, empty rooms from labs that moved out, etc. We knew there was a mice/rat problem because there would be these weird scratching sounds or movement in the vents when it was quiet enough. Anyways, it must have been 3-4-ish a.m. I was the only one in the research building and inside the individual lab rooms when I was studying, and suddenly some closed, packaged plastic, culture, flasks fell onto the ground from the shelves. It made a huge ass noise and it scared the shit out of me. I just logically attributed it to the rodents to try and focus on the final coming up. There was a weird uneasy feeling in the back of my mind, like something was wrong, and I felt like I was alone in the back of a dark movie theater watching things from afar. I became paranoid because it was perfectly flat and not on the edge of the shelf. So I set them flat on the center of the table and looked around, went back to studying, etc. Couple of moments later, the same exact noise happened. I for sure now figured it was the fucking mice near the original shelf, but when I went into the attached research lab, it was the same exact flasks I purposely put on the middle of the table. I was so freaked out that I didn't put the culture flasks back up, and when I was getting my study materials, I couldn't move as fast as I wanted to because I was so damn terrified. Anyways, I ended up trying to casually sprint to the 24-hour on-campus library that night and the rest of finals week.
BigPickleKAM says. I'm typically up to 0200 or 0300. My dog and my routine is to lap the neighborhood sometime between those hours so she can have a pee break. I've seen teenagers making out. Lovers sneaking out of neighbors' houses when the other partner is away. Drunk drivers hitting all sorts of things. Telephone poles seem to be a favorite. Bears. Drunks walking home from their night out. Who are awesome people be that type of person. And the weirdest thing was coming around the corner and hearing a smoke detector going off. Narrowed it down to a house, didn't see anyone but smelled some smoke. I banged on the door, no one answered. Called the fire department. They rolled in with one truck, agreed smoke from that house. Banged on the door. No answer. Knocked down the door, found the oven on, smoking away and no one in the house. Turned out they left in a hurry, forgot they had bread in the oven. Bought me a nice bottle of scotch and the dog a new collar / some toys.
Blockhitzz says, it was around 5 a.m. when I watched a video and the knock knock sound was playing in the back. It was really loud. I had my headphones on PC, and my window open. I live in the first floor. At first I thought my dad knocked on my door and was about to catch me at 5 a.m. at my PC, then the sound came from the other side and I thought some drunk people were trying to break into my room. That was probably the scariest thing. My pulse went nuts at that moment.
IWasEatingThoseBeans says, I was just chilling, lying in bed. The house is utterly silent. And then I hear a sharp, meaningful bang, as if someone just took their stick and tapped it on the ground. Not with incredible force, but enough to be heard. I froze up, but wrote it off. It sounded like it was coming from way downstairs. Houses make noises, whatever. Then I hear it again, this time closer in the kitchen. It sounded to me like a blind person tapping, but only ever one tap. It happened a few times, sounding like it came from random rooms. Then, tap. Directly outside my door. I was in high alert at this point, and my stairs up creak like a motherfucker. But I didn't hear anyone come up. Just that tap. I nearly shit myself. First and last time that's happened.
Ishetdeofhetmagazijn says, when I was around 12 we had one of our first sleepovers where we dared to watch a pretty scary movie. I believe it was The Sixth Sense or something. We had one of those radio-controlled clocks that would start to adjust every night. During the scene where the boy starts crying, all of a sudden the clock starts to go nuts. That's when we changed to Toy Story. But boy, I still remember that vividly.
theejohnPnom says, was making some noodles at 3 in the morning when the house phone rang. I let it go to the machine and it was actually a text from a friend. The text read, I can see you lol, but when the text to voice read it out in its robotic voice over the message machine it went, I can see you, ha 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 ha, in a witchy tone. Fucked up my whole operation.
AmEggamStabbed says, I was alone watching YouTube and I kept hearing scratching noises, then small, fast, footsteps. All of a sudden this big furry thing jumps on me. It's my dog who always sleeps in his kennel. That little pupper got out and decided to scare me half to death.
KWW1108 says, I'm a 911 dispatcher for a particularly rural area, and it's not unusual to have a night with no real calls, and I work by myself. The room I sit in is relatively small with glass windows all around the front of it, allowing me to speak to anyone who may come into the front doors. Most nights I'll make myself a couch out of 2 office chairs so I can sit with my legs stretched, which causes me to be unable to see out those windows. One night I hadn't had a single call in the first half of the shift, but right around 2:30 a random call came in that I just told the guy the phone number he needed and shrugged it off. Something in me couldn't seem to settle back down comfortably in my spot, so I instinctively checked behind me out those windows and nearly shit myself when I saw a man with a medical face mask on standing as close to our outside door as possible. Just looking inside, I gasped and stared at him a solid minute before coming to my senses. I picked up the phone and waved it at him, because there's a massive sign outside that says dial 911 for assistance. He just looked at me funny, and then turned to leave. I waved and held up a hand to tell him to wait and called one of the medics that stays in the building and asked him to go and see. Turns out the guy was super high on who knows what, but absolutely convinced he had COVID-19, his temp was completely normal. I stay pretty on edge now and check behind me a lot more often now.
realpablomd says, I used to play video games in my basement when I was younger, with the lights off of course. Well, I started hallucinating things because of a lack of sleep and staring at the TV all day long, crazy stuff. Anyways, the handle of the old wooden door we had in the far back of the basement started to rattle and shake on its own, and then slowly opened and made that creepy creaking sound. It was completely pitch black in there. I then saw a long black arm with thin, foggy fingers start to slowly reach out and climb along the wall, and then I saw two eyes peep out from behind the door. I immediately forgot about whatever game I was playing and ran as fast as I could up the stairs and locked the door. That thing scared the hell out of me. Learn my lesson not to play video games for too long, especially late in the night in a creepy basement.
sugurkewbz says, back when I was a teenager, I stayed up super late watching TV. Poltergeist was on and so I was watching that. At some point the TV just shuts off. This was the early 2000s and it was an old wooden TV. It didn't have a remote. The light in the room was off, so when the TV shut off the room was pitch black. After I turned on the light, I went to turn on the TV and it wasn't working. But after a few minutes it turned back on. It was an old television, there was probably a perfectly good explanation. But man, the timing was the worst. This thread actually got my memo going and I have a few more short stories of scary late night happenings. Just recently I was up in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep. I was hanging out on the couch and I hear this low whistle all of a sudden. It was just one long note. It trailed off and started faintly again for a few seconds. After reading some stories on r/let's not meet with creepy whistlers, it got me going. I froze up and kept listening and the sound never came back. The next morning, my son mentioned having a weird dream and I asked if it was him whistling. He said yes, he was having a dream that he was a bird. Sigh. Glad it wasn't a creepy whistling stalker. The last story I'll tell is several months ago. It was about 5 o'clock to 6 a.m. and I had just woken up. I was half dressed and in the kitchen. All of a sudden I hear a door open. Initially I thought someone was up and going to the restroom. But I look up and the front door was open. Without even skipping a beat I audibly exclaimed nope. And rushed to the door. I wasn't sure if someone was walking in or not, but I slammed it shut and locked it. A few seconds later there's a little knock on the other side. It sounds like a kid and they're asking for someone who doesn't live there. They apologize and leave. I'm sure they just got the wrong apartment, but damn. It's rather alarming seeing your front door open when you're in your underwear. My husband didn't lock the door, again. And he still doesn't. I have to check every night. 4/5 times it's unlocked.
Funtime_Michael says. I was watching a meme video and there was a knocking sound effect. I had headphones on, my blinds are broken in such a way that someone could stare straight at me, I have a mild case of paranoia, and there were reports of a hooded man in a white van near my home. I nearly pissed myself and I could not sleep for 2 more hours.
jojomecoco says. I was about 12 years old and was spending the night at my friend's house. The two of us and her younger brother were all sleeping in the game room and I couldn't fall asleep because my friend wouldn't stop snoring. So I grabbed my blanket and pillow and went to the living room at the front of the house to sleep on the couch. I'm dozing off when all of a sudden the front window is fully illuminated by the headlights of a car. Now, her house is set far back from the road, so the only way this could happen is if someone purposefully drove up the driveway. And I knew that both of her parents were at home and in bed. Then I hear the crunch of footsteps on the gravel outside and people whispering. By this point I'm fully alert. I go with my instinct and run into the game room to wake up my friend and her brother, and then we run to her parents' bedroom to tell them what's happening. Her mom starts running through the house turning on all of the lights and then we hear the screech of tires peeling out of the driveway. The scariest part is that the next morning, when I go to use their phone to call my mom to come get me, there's no dial tone. The burglars had cut the line. This was the 90s, and cell phones weren't common yet. I later find out that this isn't the first time that they had almost been burglarized. A few months before something similar had happened. Needless to say, I never spent the night at my friend's house again.
pbrslayer says. So, the other night I was watching TV with my cat around 2 a.m., and I hear a sound that sounds like a woman being murdered. I'm looking around the house and stick my head out the door and can faintly hear it coming from a park/lake near my house. I was freaking out, but wanted to look on Google and see if maybe it was an animal sound. I found this.
BraneBamage says. Went to a gas station to put air in my tires after an evening shift. Earned 1 a.m. Heard some scuffling behind the dumpster. 2 white eyes poke out and my heart started racing. Over a couple of minutes the figure zigzags through the parking lot toward me. Gets a few feet away, stares at me for like 30 seconds. I pretend to not see it and start to panic. A deep voice says, "I'll sell you this hat for $10. No thanks. You sure it's a Royals hat? I'm good, don't wear hats anyway." I heard footsteps leading away from me, saw the man in the light under the gas pumps. He was white and covered in so much dirt that I could only see his eyes in the dark. Made me sad, but he also looked like his drug problem put him there.
Lockadoot off Twitter says. When I was a teenager I would spend my summers on my family's farm. It's in a very rural part of West Virginia. No street lights or neighbors. For 3 nights in a row I would fall asleep on the couch and wake up at 3:33 and just stay up the rest of the night. We've always had a scanner that picks up local fire and police stations so we know if something is happening in the area. On the 3rd night of me waking the scanner started going crazy making noises and the police and IMS were calling in all other counties and state to come and help. I woke my dad up to see if he could figure out what it was. A family of 5 had been murdered in their house and they were searching for the killer. They eventually found him. It ended up being a local troubled kid that just wanted to see what it felt like to kill someone. Edit. I found a link to the newspaper article. I was wrong about just wanting to kill someone, but I think that came out later or it was just gossip.
Adonis_X says. Not paranormal, but midnight earthquakes are creepy for me, especially when I'm already asleep. I live in an earthquake-prone country.
Deleted says. This actually happened just last night and in retrospect it's funny, but at the moment I was scared shitless. I live in an odd house where the living room, kitchen, and bathroom are connected to the main house while my room is on the side of the house. So frequently I have to piss and I walk out in the pitch black to go to the main house. Well, I'm walking out to the main house when I hear rustling in the red mulberry tree above me. I pull out my phone and shine my flashlight in the truss just to see 2 giant glowing yellow eyes staring at me. I am really nervous but I stare down this thing just to see if it moves or something. Then it turns its head and I can see it a little more clearly. It was an owl. Most likely a barred owl, as I hear their calls a lot during the fall and winter. I actually verbally apologized in my moment of panic and quickly rushed inside so I wouldn't disturb it. Honestly, I could see why people would think they're supernatural beings or aliens. Their eyes are absolutely massive and they move really still, which is eerie. Also the fact that they hang out in trees so it looks like something massive is hanging up there stalking you, but in reality, it's an owl.
PhyberLogik says. I live in a 2nd floor apartment. My bedroom is actually supposed to be the living room and my bed is against the wall opposite the front door. Usually I keep the door locked, but this particular night, about 2 weeks ago, I forgot to lock up after a friend left. Anyway, I'm in bed reading a news article at around 2 in the morning and I hear my doorknob turning and some guy I've never seen before opens the door and sees me there looking at him. He just stands there for a couple of seconds looking just as surprised as I was when I finally loudly and assertively, to the best of my ability anyway, ask, "Can I fucking help you?" The guy says, "Shit, sorry. I didn't know anyone was home." As if that makes any difference. He just closes the door and I hear him walking down the stairs and the front door open and close. I look out the window and he's just walking down the street like nothing happened.
Imminent_riot says. I work midnights and one night I heard this horrific sound outside, like it sounded like some kind of snarling growling monster echoing up from below the window. It was absolutely freaking me out and I finally got the courage to go downstairs and look out a window. It was a fox and a raccoon fighting over garbage.
Apophyisra says. Friend and I was looking up forbidden knowledge stuff on the net, only ones at home with around 2ish, and as we were discussing it, a loud banging started in the outside concrete walls, and continued until we left the house.
Doc_Moses says. Here in South Texas there is a urban legend of a thing called La Lechuza. It's supposedly a witch that transforms into an owl with the head of a ugly old lady. Well, never knew about this until I spent the night at my cousin's. We were up around 2 in the morning watching TV and the TV turned off. My cousin and I yelled at his older brother wondering why he turned the TV off. He said, "Y'all don't hear that?" We listened but didn't hear anything. He says, "Listen. Y'all don't hear that whistling?" We listened very quietly and heard whistling coming from the backyard. It was a long whistle. Then another over and over. We asked what that was and he told us it was La Lechuza. He explained what it was and that it comes for kids who are up throughout the night. I was laying on the floor next to their bunk bed. But in front of me was a window that faced the backyard. I held my head down in fear that I would look up and see her. He said, "Just stay quiet. I'll turn the TV back on when she goes away." We laid there and eventually fell asleep. I woke up minutes later and woke them up because fuck that lol. It's a tale I've heard from others since then. Could have been something else, but as a kid, it scared the shit out of me.
pogostickrider says, "I'm an ICU nurse. One night I was looking after a ventilated patient who was brain dead. We were waiting on family to arrive the next day so we could extubate the patient and let them pass. I was waiting for the 3 a.m. cares round when I looked at the clock. It was turning backward rapidly. Freaked me out completely. For the rest of the night I stayed close to the door and within sight of the exit."
Mimi25791 says, "I was talking one of those late night walks. It was about 2 a.m. and I had been out since around 10 p.m. I was just walking when I felt a pair of eyes on my back. And then I turned to see who it was. ... It was one of my neighbors. We then had a civil chat, and went our separate ways."
Bluestar_animations says, "It was really early in the morning, and I thought the sink was running so I went to go check on it and there was no sign of water. About an hour later I heard footsteps, but it wasn't a pair that I recognized. I live with 7 people. I went to bed because I started getting paranoid. I swear I saw a few dark shadows fly around my room. My room is in the basement so it couldn't have been a trick of the light. During that week my sister had been telling me about her sleep paralysis, and I was that thing. It was tall, kinda thin, long arms and no face. But I could move. It was just kinda creepy."
Deleted says, "For 15 years I lived in the country. I was always creeped out after dark, coyotes and whatever kind of unknown monsters lurking. My husband passed away in January 2017, at the time I still had all 3 dogs. I had decided if I got home from work, usually 10:30–11 p.m., and dogs were not barking, I was not going in the house. So I got home one night and the dogs were barking, so I got out of the car. I felt like something was watching me. Small woods next to our yard. I could not get into that house fast enough, ran around making sure windows, doors all locked. I have no idea what was there."
MoreFires says, "I was working security at a mall, and had closed up. It's winter, dark and cold outside, and the way my shift ended I'd just missed my bus home, so I decided to wait for the next one in the comfy heat of the guardroom. Every store closed, security gates down, all entries double-checked and every corner checked for customers or people hiding. The lights inside had turned off on an auto timer and all that remained was the occasional emergency lights and me in an otherwise empty mall. Glancing at the security monitors occasionally, the cameras have a built-in motion sensor where it shows an icon on the screen when any is detected. I noticed 2 stories up in the pitch black, furthest away from me, a camera is indicating motion. Then it stops. Then the next camera further into the mall on the same floor, then the next one and so on. Then the escalator that was turned off, and so it went, all the way down to my office. It went for a while outside the door to the guardroom, then it stopped."
Xenomorph383 says, "Cool summer night in Texas, heard a fucking roar. I heard this very clear and the roar sounded like a fictional monster."
wiwgtjiutt says, "A couple months ago I was watching YouTube as usual. Then randomly it sounded like a rubber ball was bouncing on the other side of my door, but when I checked there was nothing. It happened for about 3 to 4 nights. One day I said F it and I told my mother, who I currently live with, when she woke up. The next night it stopped and I haven't heard it again.
Losing_face says. One time, and only one time ever, someone knocked on my door. Sounds pretty lame, but the spike in heart rate and adrenaline rush that immediately followed make it a harrowing experience that I reflect on all too often.
D34th snooze says. The creepiest thing to me has been the sheer amount of insects/spiders you see crawling out of the woodworks that late. I've seen more things lowering down right in front of me late at night than during the day. I've also heard children's laughter outside at 2 a.m., but that was probably just the wind. Yeah, hey.
ShadeScapes says. Back in the days of portable phones being a newish thing for households, not cell phones, just portable landlines, we had a neighbor whose entire family were more or less criminals. Went to cash a buddy at like 1 a.m. to come chillin'. While on the phone we got some kinda crosstalk from police radio banter and heard that's where they stashed the body. Sure enough, 2 to 3 weeks later, my neighbor's entire family vanished from their house overnight one night and wound up leaving a child behind, just straight up chillin' in a falling apart house. Kid got saved, happy ending for all. Except no idea what happened to those neighbors. I know one of the kids got out of jail semi-recently and looks like he's 50 and is factually only 29. Never once saw from that family again except the one time I saw that kid. The father was questioned from what I understand and the wife had done all the major criming.
missingapuzzlepiece says. I was on a cleaning binge one night. Around 2:30, all my family was asleep and the house quiet except for me. I opened the door to the playroom, which was pitch black because I hadn't turned on the light yet. At that exact moment, the burner to my daughter's cheap play kitchen turns on. The burner turns bright red and makes a crackling sound when you turn it on. The only way to turn it on is by turning the knob. Reflexively, I threw broom into the room and slammed the door. It had never turned on by itself before or after. Scared the hell out of me. A few nights later, I'm getting a glass of water when I see something looking at me from a face-sized hole in my cheap mini blinds. This thing wasn't human, it was upside down and would have to have been suspended in air. It was also grinning at me in the most evil way imaginable. It was grotesque and terrifying and vanished when I blinked. I tried to rationalize it by telling myself I was probably half asleep still. But the image is burned in my mind and I've never spoken about it before.
DeFactoLyfe says. I was sitting on the porch with my buddy one night in a not-so-favorable part of town. We start hearing this horrible scraping sound coming down the road and after a few moments a pickup truck drove by with a man water skiing on a metal trash can lid holding onto a rope off the back. Craziest shit I've ever seen.
Deleted says. About 3 a.m. I'm browsing Reddit and shit about demons and such pop up and right after I get the American National Emergency Service test got through. I immediately had an anxiety attack and plugged my ears until it was gone. Shit was weird but terrifying in the moment. P.S. The American National Emergency Service alert noise is by far the scariest one I've heard.
Zanki says. I have two, one human, one weird. So I have no idea why I was up so late, but it was around 5 a.m. and I really needed to use the toilet. So I get up, head to the top of the stairs and look down. It was already light enough I didn't need to turn on the lights. There was just this big black shape at the bottom of the stairs, half in the doorway of the front room. It notices me and in a flash it's run across the bottom of the stairs, into the front room, ran over a plastic bag I'd left on the stairs and spooked my rats and me. I dived back into my room and made my then boyfriend get up so I could go pee. I can't explain it. Maybe I was just tired and imagining it, maybe something was there, I don't know. Around 3 a.m., both times I've had someone try and break into my house. The issue? They think slamming on the back doors is going to get them inside. First time it happened I had a dog who didn't wake up. Guy ran when I turned on the landing light. I tried to wake my then boyfriend up, who told me I was just having a nightmare and went back to sleep. I was wide awake and was awake when it started and had to investigate on my own. Second time I was actually asleep. I live alone at the moment and someone tried to break in via the patio doors. I turned on the landing light again, the sounds stopped and I heard more banging and crashing. I was terrified and sat at the top of the stairs for a while with a Kali stick to defend myself before I checked out downstairs. It was all quiet. I found out the next day the person had tripped and knocked over all my garden furniture escaping.
Genghis_Chance says, I heard an actual owl killing something outside my window, that was creepy as fuck. Sounded like aliens from a movie or something.
Tyler 2018 says, this one happened not too long ago. It might not mean much to anyone, but I haven't ever felt chills like this in my life. I'm in my parents' house alone, taking care of my dogs and keeping the house tidy, and I hear a strange noise coming from my old room that is now a playroom for my two little sisters. I go down to investigate, and turn on the light. I don't hear a single noise. So I just kind of shrugged it off. I go back upstairs to check on my dogs that are outside, and as I'm about to go out the back door, I hear the noise again. So after checking on my dogs, I go back downstairs and investigate. I went back to the room, and turned on the lights again. I shit you not, all 7 of the toys down there all started making their loud noises in unison. That was the biggest fuck this shit, I'm out moments. I ran upstairs in a full-blown sprint, put the dogs in their kennels, and drove over to my home. I've only went to the parents' house to let the dogs out and to water the garden. TL Doctor 20-year-old gets spooked over a couple of totally haunted kids' toys, pees himself, and almost decides to burn down the house because of it.
Unknown Object 3 says, a few nights ago, I went to the bathroom at 2 a.m. and I sat there for you know what to do. I looked towards the door at my left because I hadn't anything else to do, just to find some weird figure staring at me. I also saw 2 glowing orbs in that shit, so I'm pretty sure it wasn't my imagination. It scares the hell out me. I didn't even scream because I was frozen from fear. Creepiest shit ever happened. Last thing, my PC installing Ishetdeofhetmagazijn 32 antivirus at 057. No one knows except my parents, that I have robophobia, the fear of robots, humanoid ones. And so I found that robot just staring at me through the screen, while the laptop was making strange beeps and weird noises. My heart was racing so much.
dreamsindirt says, this is probably not the creepiest thing to happen to me past midnight, but it comes to mind. The entrance to our basement is outside and requires walking around the house through our heavily wooded yard. I went down to get some tool for an art project at 3 or 4 in the morning and hear an unearthly low gurgling in the dark woods but can't see anyone or thing. It turns into an inhuman slow tinny, distorted warble and I took the hell off. I later realized there are wild turkeys that hang out in our yard. I had probably bothered one sleeping. I guess in addition to gobbling, they can also moan and make eldritch horror noises when they feel like it. I have also run into a black bear on one of these trips to the basement, but the unseen turkey was 100% scarier.
The E_OG_Bigfoot says, so a few years ago I was still living with my mom while I was going to college as rent in my area is nuts. She lives in a pretty decent suburban area and not much tends to happen on there. So anyway, it's on 12:30 and I'm sitting in bed watching Altered Carbon on Netflix, great show, when I hear a very loud and very loud scream. At first I think it's the show, but when I pause it was still going. I jumped out of bed and go to my gun safe and grab my pistol and flashlight, then head to the big bay windows at the front of the house that look out at the street, but I can't see anything and I don't hear another scream. I'm starting to think it's a fox or something, but I go outside through the side garage door trying to be sneaky just to look around and see if I can see anything suspicious. I don't see or hear anything else, so I go back inside and ask my mom if she heard it. She says no, but something did wake her up. Right about then we hear some people start yelling outside down the street. We go to the front windows just in time to see a guy pushing a woman to the ground and taking something from her. She's screaming and crying and he's yelling at her and throwing something on the ground near her. I'm not sure if he was throwing it at her or just the ground. So my mom calls 911 and we keep watching them. They keep yelling at each other, but she is walking down the road trying to get away from him and he is following her. At this point they walk down the road to the point where we can't see them anymore. The dispatcher is asking if we can safely keep eyes on them, so I walk out to watch them, and as soon as I can see them again I see him push her on the ground again. I tell the dispatcher this and she tells me the cops are 2 minutes away. Well, about this time the girl starts running back the way they came, and before I can get back in the house she sees me and starts screaming for help. So I pass the phone back to my mom and grab her. She's crying and hyperventilating, her face is black and blue and her knees are all skinned up. She tells me she was trying to call 911 but he took her phone, that's what he was throwing on the ground, and she's begging me to help her. At this point the guy is about 20 feet away and I don't want to turn my back on him. My gun is in my pocket and I have my flashlight out and shining in his face. 1000 lumen jet beam for those of you that care. Shout out to r/flashlight, which slows him down a bit. This whole time Hess still screaming at her and I'm giving him commands to stop and stay on the other side of the road, but he is still coming slowly. I told him stop about 8 times, stay over there about 4 times and get back about 4. At this point I hear sirens and tell him cops are coming, man, it's not worth it, back off, at which point he starts screaming directly at me and picks up his pace a bit. At this point I'm mentally preparing to shoot his guy as he's about 5 inches taller and probably 50 pounds heavier than me. Hess about 6 feet from me now and I tell him last warning, keep coming at me and I will shoot you, I have a gun. Thankfully this seemed to dissuade him, he started screaming shoot me. Shoot me. But veered down a side street that was parallel with where we were standing. About 20 seconds later the cops came flying in, code 3, about 4 of them. I pointed at where the screaming dude went with my flashlight and they took off down that way. One of the cops stopped with us and asked where my gun was. I said in my pocket and he said good, keep it there, then started talking to the girl. Turns out that they were dating but things were rough. They had been drinking and talking things out. When she said he just snapped. He took her phone and wouldn't let her call for help. He had shocked her for about 10 seconds and beat her for like an hour. She finally got away from him, which is the first scream I heard, but he had dragged her back into his house. She got away again, which is when we saw them. She didn't want to press charges but she said she would get a restraining order and wouldn't see him again. The police advised her that the DA could still press charges against him and she really should, but she wouldn't budge. They ended up arresting him for drunk and disorderly and I'm fairly sure he had charges pressed by the DA. However, I was never summoned for court so I don't know the outcome. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night.
Mustang6172 says, I was stargazing and my neighbor decided that would be the appropriate time to fire a shotgun.
Zeliaaaa says, it actually happened when I was maybe 12-13. Basically I was sitting on the toilet going through Reddit, when I hear a weird crack. I was asking myself what happened so I got up and checked. Turns out a door down the hall had opened itself. I was confused because my sister, which is also a night owl, wasn't home and my parents keep their door locked so my little brother can't get out. I told myself that time window was probably open. I looked in every room. But every window was closed. I decided to just ignore it and go back to Reddit. I laid in my bed and then I see a weird red blinking thing. I do have something on the ceiling which blinks, but not in the red color. I felt the need to get up and see what that was. But I used to be really scared of such things as ghosts or demons. The next day when I got up I told my sister about that on the phone, but she just told me I was imagining that because we had recently watched a horror movie together. The next night, it happened again. It was going on for a few nights, when one night I hear some strange laughter. I was in shock. I just stared at the red blinking lights for a few moments, as if I was looking into my enemy's eyes, and mumbling something like I am not scared of you. Then it never happened again. I am still really confused with what happened those nights, but I don't think about it that often.
MiikuuMcFluffybutt says, I live in a really rural area, so I get a fabulous view of the clear night sky. Especially any comets that fly by. It's my own special time that I get to enjoy outer space in nearly complete solitude. Well, one night I was awake super late because I was heading home after work. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning. I had happened to look above me after I parked my car in the driveway and saw this weird stream of light pass over my head as I got out of the car. I thought nothing of it because for all I know I could have just been seeing things due to high fatigue. So, I get up to my room, and just before I head off to bed I hear a weird, low humming sound like somebody vocoded the noise of a diesel engine. I look out the window and floating a little ways above my neighbor's house is this weird saucer-shaped craft with what looks like the most intense Christmas light display on the hull. It wasn't doing anything except hovering. Again, thought I was just seeing shit because I was tired, so I went to bed. The next morning one of my other neighbors was talking about the same thing I saw. Exact same description and everything. I really didn't pursue the subject further, because fuck that shit. I don't want to deal with any alien stuffs. Granted, I've always believed in extraterrestrials just because it makes sense that we're not the only planet with life. I just don't want to get involved in any of that stuff because I don't want to accidentally learn something I shouldn't.
Kaijol says. Fucking shadow people. My house is crawling with them around 2 a.m. I should go to sleep soon. It's 1:16 a.m. Also hearing police sirens far off in the distance for no reason. Nothing happens where I live, so there is no reason for it to go off at the same time each night. It's recently stopped though, which is odd.
The E_sauceboss says. One night I was doing my homework and heard an ear-piercing scream coming from outside. I tell my dad, who heard it, but much fainter, indicating it came from near me, and we got the gun. There was nothing outside. Minutes later his phone rings and it's from a friend who leads a nearby neighborhood's security. When we pick it up all we hear sounded like heavy breathing, twigs snapping, and then wind. The wind picked up and the phone hung up. My dad calls back minutes later and asks WTF just happened to his friend. He says his phone was off and charging and only just heard him call. When asked what the sound was, he said there was literally nothing that could have made those sounds. My dad wasn't a recent contact either. It couldn't have been Hey Siri because at the time, he was in a different room. There is also no chance this was a prank for either event.
J4K30 says. About a month ago I was chilling in the basement at my dad's house and I was playing the Xbox. I hear a loud banging and my dog's footsteps on the hardwood floor. I thought someone was breaking in and was kicking my dog around because Roger rarely ever barks. I grab my knife and run upstairs ready to fight someone and I find my dad on the floor. He was on drugs and he had fell. Didn't make the fear any better.
Deleted says. I work in a warehouse alone and see people walking around from the corner of my eye.
In 1K1B1K1 he says. A stranger staring at me through my window, in my yard.
JHNMNLSTS 1997 says. I think that was around 2:50 a.m. My room is at first floor. I decided to go down and take the mouse pad from the PC because I'm not comfortable using my mouse only. Everyone is upstairs sleeping in the second room. I went down to the living room. Before you reach living room yell past dining room, the only light source is from our garage. Before I got the mouse pad, I heard a sound like someone is breathing but I don't know which direction. It's like I'm inside the sound. I looked at the windows to see if there is a cat sitting, didn't see any cat. Then I heard the sound again. It was so loud but it also feels like I'm the only one hearing it and it's coming from my back of head. My arm hair starts to stand up. I went up fast, feeling my back very heavy. I ran upstairs face straight scared of seeing something and quickly closed the door.
Ninjiuswind says. I was studying for an art history exam past midnight, as usual, and I'd if it was the effect of caffeine but suddenly papers started moving and the same paper with the same artwork used to fall from my desk multiple times. It was a sculpture called Maman by Louise Bourgeois, which I used to hate. I was so pissed off because it kept falling from my desk and I was getting distracted. I took it as a sign and I started rereading and memorizing everything while being a zombie. Next morning I got that sculpture to analyze and comment in the exam. Same happened multiple times the night before the exam. Once I remember with Sophia. Probably not the creepiest but weird AF.
Cukistar says. I usually move through my house at night in the dark, so that day I went downstairs to get a snack. The stairs are next to the kitchen so I turned on the corner and crashed with something. The only light came from the windows and I saw this silhouette a little more taller than me. I froze in pure panic and terror, wanted to scream but couldn't. I don't know if this lasted for a few seconds but it felt like several minutes and the thing didn't move. Finally reacted and decided to reach for the light switch. The thing was a plastic pine tree that we have as decoration, usually is in a corner, but that day my mom moved it for cleaning or something and forgot to put it back in place.
FuzzButtQuestion says, I was listening to one of those long videos with background music, and this motherfucker of a video maker added knocking and children's whispers into the sound clip. It freaked me out as it had no warnings. Just once did it happen, like an hour or so into the music.
Nomad77 says, the most freaked out I've ever gotten was 3 years ago while I was outside at night with my dog. My family lives 15 minutes outside of town and are surrounded by farmland and woods. We have about 15 acres of property and most of the area is wooded. One night when I was home alone at around 2 a.m. I took my dog outside to go pee. He went about his business and I sat on the porch waiting for him to finish. Before he got the chance to go, his head shot up and stared into the trees. I thought he might have seen a raccoon or something until I heard branches moving and twigs snapping. I walked up to my dog and started squinting my eyes trying to see whatever was moving around in the darkness, when I hear a little girl start giggling. It's the middle of the night, pitch black out besides the tiny porch light, and there is a small child laughing in the woods. Needless to say, I noped the fuck out and grabbed my dog by the collar before running inside. I remember running around the house locking all the doors and windows before sitting in my room waiting for my parents to come home. I'm a big skeptic when it comes to anything supernatural or paranormal and all that, but I have no explanation for a little girl alone in the woods on someone else's property in the middle of the night. Thinking back on it still gives me the creeps.
OrionPax_500 says, I was sleeping in the middle of the hall, my room was being completely rebuilt, and I was watching TV when the toilet in the bathroom, which was about 5 feet away from my bed, randomly flushed.
MoonchildNellie says, I was home alone, chillin' in my bed. The TV was on, and I was doing something on my phone. Something tapped on my window. It wasn't weird, I was like, it's raining? Interesting, and got back to whatever I was doing. After like 10 minutes it happened again, but it didn't sound like rain, it was someone/something. It scared me a bit, so I turned the TV off. 30 minutes nothing happened. So I was on my phone, and it happened again. I told myself, okay, one more time and I'm going to check it, and it happened again. So I took my pillow and walked to my window. Man. I'm trying to sleep. I heard laugh and frowns. After that I ran to my bed, and turned on the lights. When I checked it in the morning, because I was too scared to check it at night, and there was nothing. It wasn't raining, not even something that would fall down from flat above us. I just stood there in confusion. And yet, I still don't know what it was.
_scooter_ says, I was sleeping on the couch watching a movie when I woke up to the blender in the kitchen. I turned it off and there was just like a tablespoon of water, probably the fact that I live in a creepy, creaky old school house that's been around longer than 1933.
M3Gaman1080 says, I stayed up all night when I was a kid and snuck downstairs to play video games. Surprisingly, this happened more at like 7 a.m. when the sun was just barely coming up and hadn't quite cleared the mountain yet, so it was blue outside. I was plugging in my N64 controller and I was looking at the black screen when I heard snap or a crack or some sort of slapping sound. Simultaneously, while looking at the black screen, I saw a flash of light coming from under my mom's sandal. It was the last time for a long time that I ever stayed up all night again. Now I have insomnia, so I'm up most nights until at least 3 a.m.
El Samsel says, I was on phone with a friend of mine who we can call Delilah. So me and Delilah tend to talk 4 hours late into the night very loudly since I tend to be alone. It was about 3 a.m. and I had just had this off feeling the whole night. I was looking around, closing blinds and jumping. I had to turn on the TV for extra noise because it was so eerie. I heard the door make sounds it didn't usually do. Some odd creaks, the usual scary movie sounds. But then she said, I had a dream where we were in this exact situation but something really bad happened. My heart dropped. I looked around everywhere trying to play cool. Found out later this neighborhood had issues with suspicious people and everyone keeps their lights on now.
DZ55 says. I was up at 3:30 a.m. standing in the kitchen. I think I was contemplating a snack or better a drink. Not sure. The fucking over the oven microwave turns on and starts displaying rotating alien runes on the digital display. Was too shocked at first. Literally had to stare at it like this is not possible. Then worried because it had nothing in it / fire? I pushed every button to shut it off, then reached for the plug and unplugged it. Googled it later, apparently GE had some things with their microwaves. Never used it again before replacing it.
Beat Salt says. Oh, I have many in total, and lots are recent. One actually happened tonight. I'll just describe the creepiest, as requested. Buckle up. One time, not that long ago, in the midst of insomnia, I was in my room. I suddenly noticed and got bothered by a sound of people talking non-stop in the hallway and a light shining under the door I hadn't noticed. My first thought was, oh, it's just mom and dad going to bed. No big deal. But the longer I waited, the louder the voices became, and I realized there were many people I was hearing. I can only describe them as very loud, incoherent whispers. I thought, shit, this is weird, WTF, who could be out there? I got up and slowly walked towards the door, the voices growing louder and staying where they were. Or so I thought. When I reached the door, I opened it, immediately finding that the voices were completely gone. Even more creepy, the light was gone too. It didn't take me long to realize what just happened. I've just had an intense audio-visual hallucination. Safe to say I'm paranoid at this point. So, I immediately remembered my brother was sleeping downstairs that night. We share a room, so I warily went downstairs to see if that paranormal spectacle was somehow his doing. Me, hey, were you just upstairs? In the hallway, outside our room? Him, oh no, I've been down here since you last saw me. Me, paranoid, oh, weird. When did mom and dad go to bed? Him, about 2 hours ago. I've had many similar nights. Days too, but especially nights. I'm told I'm schizophrenic, but I never got a diagnosis. It often goes misdiagnosed and or otherwise untreated. I'm not sure when or if I'll see a professional about it.
Nutella Good says. Dude in the middle of the road flags me down. His shirt is covered in blood splotches. He seems high or drunk or something and he wants to get in my car. I leave him and call the cops.
Pandemonium Juke says. The sound of a horse galloping through the street. In the middle of the city. Down a one-way street. And no sound of it returning.
Skate3_mandem says. I got dragged out of bed by nothing, and when I tried to see, nothing came out in the eye. Tried hitting my radiator, big thing that warms up your house. My hand just stopped in motion.
Goddess777 says. One night, I think it was Saturday or Sunday, I was on the trampoline around maybe 10-11 p.m. maybe, and I heard some random woman scream. I heard "Get off me" screamed loudly. I was under the impression that someone was getting murdered. So I went back inside and texted my friend and told her. She then texts me back and goes, "One time on Halloween someone knocked on my door and when I opened it no one was there. It was midnight." I just have mixed emotions about it. I mean, in one way I wonder what happened, and in another way I don't want to know at the same time.
MZZNay says. Looking out of my bedroom window and see a creepy guy watching me.
Magic-Baguette says. A giant dude in boxers, probably drunk or sleepwalking neighbor, tried to come in at 3 a.m. Do you know how creepy it is when your doorbell rings at 3 a.m., you're not expecting anyone, and 2 minutes later it rings again, and when you ask who it is, no one answers but you hear a little mumble from the other side and it rings again.
420 Dopod says. Sleeping in my bed in a rat got on my bed and at 3 a.m. was on top of me, squirmed to hell and couldn't sleep in the room the rest of the night.
The Ducked Up Kid says. Not past midnight but 11ish, a couple of years ago I was lying in bed when I started hearing something whisper under my bed at the rear end. It was just gibberish whispering, so I just yelled my parents as loud as I could and it stopped just as my parents bursted into the room. Then I explained them and they told me it was probably because I was sleepy. Never heard it afterwards, but it sure scared the hell out of me.